This is the first lecture on the respiratory system. What is the function of the respiratory system? So first of all, the respiratory system has several functions. The two main functions are ventilation and respiration. Pulmonary ventilation is the movement of air into and out of the lungs. Respiration is the ability to supply the body with oxygen and the ability to dispose the body of carbon dioxide. Ventilation and respiration are both performed by the respiratory system. In addition, the respiratory system provides a sense of smell, provides for verbal speech, and can control the blood pH by controlling plasma bicarb levels. These are the major organs of respiration. We'll go over each one of these individually. Here's a cartoon showing you where the major organs of respiration are located. Most of this should be a review to you. Let's start with the nose. The nose provides entrance for air through the nostrils. The nose moistens and warms air that enters into the lungs. It filters and cleans inspired air. It serves as a resonating chamber for speech, and it detects odors. Two regions are the external nose and the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is bounded by the nasal septum medially. Posteriorly, there's the nasopharynx in this area. The roof of the nasal cavity is ethmoid and sphenoid bones. The floor is a hard and soft palate. Here's a hard palate here and a soft palate in the back of the throat. But those are the boundaries of the nasal cavity. This is the nasal cavity in the picture. These are little flaps here. These are the concha, the superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. It's a hard palate, soft palate. You can feel that your hard palate is the bony, hard upper portion of the mouth, and the soft palate is back towards the uvula. It's soft tissue, not bony tissue. So the nasal concha, there's superior, middle, and inferior nasal concha. They protrude medially from the lateral walls of the nasal cavity. Here's a diagram from a frontal view. See how they kind of overlap? They act like little folds of skin that fold down into the nasal cavity. When air flows through that, it creates turbulence of the air, and it just stirs air up, and it allows the air to be filtered and moistened. Inferior to each nasal concha is the nasal meatus. The nasal meatus here is just an opening underneath the concha. The pharynx is a muscular tube that connects the nasal cavity and the mouth of the larynx and the esophagus. It's composed of skeletal muscle. Therefore, you know this is muscle under voluntary control. The three regions are the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx. Nasopharynx is the upper portion, it's behind the nose. The oropharynx is behind the mouth, just like the prefix oral, think of oral. Laryngopharynx is more inferior, and that's in the region of the larynx. Larynx is the vocal cord and the voice box area. The soft palate and the uvula close the nasopharynx during swallowing. In the nasopharynx, there's the auditory tube, the pharyngotympanic tube. This is the ear canal that connects the middle ear to the nasal cavity. And of course, the uvula is that soft tissue that hangs down in the back of the throat, that folds back over the nasal passageway during swallowing. Here's the uvula from a sagittal viewpoint. The uvula sticks down the back of the throat. There's the opening of the pharyngotympanic tube here. There's tonsils. Remember, tonsils is a lymphoid organ. There's the oropharynx and the laryngopharynx. Oropharynx is basically the throat. It's the part of the pharynx behind the mouth area. The palatine and the lingual tonsils trap germs and are part of the immune system. And below that is the laryngopharynx. It's passageway for food and air. It extends to the larynx, where it's continuous with the esophagus. The larynx and the pharynx are both kind of spelled similarly, but they're different. The pharynx is a part of your throat that connects your inner nose to your throat. It's a part of the throat at the back of your mouth. Below the pharynx is the larynx. The larynx contains your vocal cords. So it's all part of the same tube, if you will. But the pharynx is the upper part, the larynx is the lower part. The larynx is a cartilaginous organ located between the trachea and the pharynx. It's also called the voice box. It provides a patent airway. The epiglottis is a structure in the larynx that routes air and food into proper channels. You want air going in the lungs and food going in the esophagus, and not the other way around. The vocal cords are there for voice production. There's cartilage in the larynx. There's a thyroid cartilage, which gives a prominent Adam's apple, and the ring-shaped cricoid cartilage. Here's pictures of the same structures. The epiglottis. It looks like a thumb almost. It goes down when you swallow. This opens up and lets the food go down to the esophagus. And when you swallow, this epiglottis closes over the pharynx so that food does not go down into the trachea. Here's another picture of the structures. Here's the hyoid bone. This is the epiglottis behind the hyoid bone, the thyroid cartilage, the laryngeal prominence, which is the Adam's apple, and the cricoid cartilage is right below that. And below that are the cartilage rings of the trachea. Here's a sagittal view of the same structures. This is a look down your throat at the vocal cords. The vocal cords are represented in white. The production of voice is a result of expired air going across the vocal cords. The vocal cords act as the vocal cords vibrate as air goes across, almost in a similar way that the strings of a violin vibrate when they're played with a bow, and the vibration causes a sound. The pitch of the voice is determined by the length and the tension of the vocal cords. The loudness of the voice depends on the force of air across the vocal cords. And now, vocal cords may be where the voice starts, but the chambers of the pharynx, the oral and nasal cavity, sinus cavities all amplify and enhance the sound quality. And the sound is shaped by language. The sound is shaped into a language by the muscles of the pharynx, the tongue, the soft palate, and the lips. These allow you to say the different letters of the alphabet. Now moving on down to the trachea. The trachea, also known as the windpipe, carries air to the lungs. It has mucosa. Inside is lined by mucosa. It's moved by the ciliated pseudostratified epithelium with goblet cells that create mucus. And there's cartilage rings made of hyaline cartilage, and the cartilage rings' purpose is to keep the trachea from collapsing. Without the cartilage rings, the trachea would be soft, and when air flows through it, it could collapse. The cartilage on the trachea maintains an open airway. Here's another view of the cross-section of the trachea and the esophagus. This is the esophagus here. And the esophagus is posterior to the trachea. Trachea is anterior to the esophagus. The bronchial tree are basically respiratory passages throughout the lungs, divided into two sections. There's the conducting zone and the respiratory zone. The conducting zone consists of the trachea, the primary bronchus, which goes to each lung, the secondary bronchus, which goes to each lobe, tertiary bronchus, and terminal bronchioles. So each of these levels, they divide and get smaller and smaller. And then they get to the side of the gas exchange, that's the respiratory zone. And that's made of the respiratory bronchioles, the alveolar duct, the alveolar sac, and the alveolus themselves. Here's the trachea, and the trachea splits into the left and right primary bronchus. There's two lungs, right and left, so one primary bronchus goes to the right lung, one goes to the left lung. The secondary bronchus is called the lobar bronchus. It's called lobar because it goes to the lobes of the lungs. The left lung has two lobes, upper lobe and a lower lobe, superior, inferior lobe. The right lung has a superior lobe, a middle lobe, and an inferior lobe. So there's three right lobar bronchi. There's only two on the left. And then each time it divides, the next division is tertiary. It just splits off. It's smaller and smaller bronchial vessels. Till we get down small enough to get to the respiratory zone, and that's where we have our terminal bronchiole, respiratory bronchioles, the alveolar duct, the alveolar sac, and the alveola of the individual air sacs. It's just another slide of the alveola. Look at a microscopic slide next to a cartoon. It's in the alveoli is where oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged with the blood that's been pumped from the heart. So there's a close relationship between the capillary system of the pulmonary capillary system, and the alveoli. The alveolar and the capillary walls have their basement membranes fused together. It's about a half of micrometer thick. It's a very small distance, so the gas can easily go from the alveoli to the across the basement membrane into the capillaries, or vice versa. The alveolar walls are covered by simple squamous epithelium. We talked about this when we talked about histology in the last term. There's two different types of alveolar cells. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 are simple squamous epithelium that lines out the alveoli. Type 2 alveoli are cuboidal. Type 1 alveoli they're thin, and they're allowed gas to fuse, oxygen and carbon dioxide to fuse across them, to go in and out of the alveoli space and the capillaries. Whereas the function of the type 2 alveoli is to produce a product called surfactant. Surfactant is a secretion that reduces the surface tension of water molecules, which prevents the collapse of the alveoli after each expiration. It kind of maintains the open alveoli. Here's a cartoon showing type 1, type 2 alveolar cells. Here's type 1 is the simple squamous epithelium. Type 2 is the more cuboidal shape cells that secrete the surfactant. This shows how you have the capillary and the alveolus, how the basement membranes are fused together and make such a small space. It's easy for oxygen to diffuse from the alveoli into the capillary, and for carbon dioxide to diffuse from the capillary into the alveoli. So it's a fairly easy conduction of these gases across this membrane. Alveolar macrophages phagocytize dust particles in the alveoli, and they phagocytize infectious microorganisms. That's why they're called dust cells, because they gobble up the dust. Now look at the lungs itself. Basically occupy the whole thoracic cavity except for the mediastinum. There's the root of the lung, or the hilum of the lung. It's where the vascular and bronchial attachments of the mediastinum begin. And there's the costal surface. Costal means rib, so the costal surface of the lung is the anterior, lateral, and posterior surface of the lung, which basically borders on the rib cage. The lung is primarily composed of alveoli. What's not alveoli is mainly elastic connective tissue, which gives the properties of elasticity so the lungs can expand and then return to their original position. It shows the different pleura. You might remember this from when we talked about chapter 1 in anatomy 1. There's the pleural cavity is basically the cavity where the lungs are located in. And there's a double membrane. There's visceral pleura and parietal pleura. The parietal pleura is a pleura lining the wall of the thoracic wall. The visceral pleura is a pleura that lines the lung. The apex of the lung is the superior tip. The base of the lung rests on the diaphragm. The hilum is the mediastinal surface. It's entry and exit of the blood vessels, the bronchi, the lymphatic vessels, and nerves. And remember we said that the right lung has 3 lobes, the left lung has 2 lobes. Here's left lung with 2 lobes, right lung with 3 lobes. Here's the apex of the lung, the base of the lung by the diaphragm. Mechanics of breathing. There's 2 parts of breathing. There's inspiration and expiration. Inspiration is an active process. The diaphragm contracts and flattens. The intercostal muscles contract to raise the ribs, and as a result, air flows into the lungs. When the diaphragm contracts, it creates a negative pressure like a suction, and that suction draws air into the lungs. Then during expiration is a passive process. The expiration, the diaphragm relaxes, intercostal muscles relax, and air flows out of the lungs. Generally, the work of breathing is with inspiration. To expire, you just relax, and things go back to the relaxed state, and air leaves the lungs. This shows a sequence of events of inspiration and expiration. Let me go back, In inspiration, inspiratory muscles contract. This is the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles, causing the rib cage to rise and the diaphragm to descend. The thoracic cavity volume increases. The lungs are stretched. The interpulmonary volume increases. The pressure in the lungs drops to -1 millimeters of mercury, and therefore air flows from the outside air pressure into the lungs down a pressure gradient. Because there's greater pressure outside the lungs than it is down in the lungs. So the air is rushed into the lungs, and it fills up the lungs. With expiration, the inspiratory muscles relax, the rib cage descends, thoracic volume decreases. The lungs have elastic recoil, so that they just return to their original position, and air flows out of the lungs. Remember, inspiration is active, expiration is passive. This shows the various pressures. There's atmospheric pressure, which is the pressure of the air around you. There's pressure. Transpulmonary pressure is the difference between the pressure inside the lungs and atmospheric pressure. There's intrapulmonary pressure, which air pressure inside the lungs. Intrapleural pressure is the pressure inside the pleura. We've talked about this already, but the parietal pleura is part of the pleura on the border of the thoracic wall. Of course, visceral pleura, it lines the lung itself. The pleural fluid fills the pleural cavity and provides lubrication and surface tension, and helps the lungs expand and recoil. Here's another diagram showing the same thing again. It just shows you where things are in relation to each other. Notice the esophagus, the vertebra body. So this is posterior, this is anterior. Trachea is going to be anterior to the esophagus. Got the different pleural, parietal, and visceral pleural, the pleural cavity. The heart is in the mediastinum.